The broadcast changed everything across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as Velthrix told her story. They saw an ancient creature, worn by centuries of isolation and grief, speaking with a voice that trembled but never broke. They heard about the true nature of the Drakkarath. The scholars and healers and peacekeepers who had been painted as monsters, they learned about the purge, the systematic extermination of an entire species, the genocide that had been dressed up as self-defense and sold to the galaxy as necessary. And they saw the human colonists of New Guangzhou standing beside her, protecting her, refusing to let history repeat itself. Krulvax received orders from the council within minutes of the broadcast beginning. Stand down, return to orbit, await further instructions. The political fallout was already spinning out of control. Species that had lived under the Council's rule for millennia were demanding answers, questioning histories they had been taught since childhood, wondering what other lies they had been told. The Council could not afford an open conflict with a human colony while the galaxy watched. Not yet, not until they figured out how to spin this in their favor. Krulvax retreated to his shuttle with his officers, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. He looked at Yuna before he left, and his black eyes held a promise. This is not over, he said. The Council does not forget, and it does not forgive. Neither do we. Yuna replied. The shuttle lifted off and disappeared into the clouds. For the first time in 847 years, a Drakkarath walked beneath an open sky. Velthrix emerged from the ashlands slowly, painfully, her weakened body struggling with every step. But she walked. Yuna walked beside her, one small hand resting on the dragon's foreleg, guiding her friend toward the colony that had risked everything to protect her. The colonists had gathered to watch, hundreds of humans standing in silence as the last of the Drakkarath entered their home. Many of them were still afraid. They had grown up with stories of dragon monsters, with warnings about the terrible creatures that had nearly destroyed the galaxy. But they looked at Velthrix now, this ancient being who moved with such careful grace, whose eyes held such gentle wisdom. And they began to understand that stories could lie. Dr. Mira stepped forward as Velthrix reached the center of the colony square. "Welcome to New Guangzhou," she said. "You're safe here," Velthrix lowered her great head until her eyes were level with the human xenobiologist. "I have lived for 3,000 years, she said, and her voice carried across the silent crowd. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed wonders that would take 100 lifetimes to describe. And I have survived horrors that no being should ever have to endure." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled humans. "But in all those years, across all those worlds, I have never seen anything like what your species has done today." Velthrix turned to look at Yuna, her young friend who had started all of this with a canteen of water and a heart full of compassion. "You had every reason to fear me," she said. "Your galaxy taught you to hate my kind. Your laws demanded my death. And helping me could have cost you everything." The dragon's voice grew thick with emotion. "But you helped me anyway." A child saw a stranger in need and chose kindness over fear. And when the consequences came, her family and her community stood beside her, not because they had anything to gain, but because they believed it was right. Tears were flowing down Yuna's cheeks now, but she was smiling. "That is rarer than you know," Velthrix continued. "That is more precious than any treasure in any galaxy. Compassion in the face of fear, courage in the face of power, love for a stranger who has done nothing to earn it." She raised her head and addressed the crowd once more. "Your species is young. You have not yet learned to be cynical. You have not yet forgotten how to hope, and that, more than any technology or weapon or resource, is what makes you extraordinary." 1 year later, Vareth 7 had transformed. The Ashlands were no longer dead Velthrix. acknowledged that the galaxy had thought lost forever. Ancient Dracorath techniques for healing damaged ecosystems and restoring life to barren worlds, working with the colony's scientists. She had helped repair the underground water systems that the Purge had destroyed, brought life back to soil that had been dead for centuries, and turned the scorched wasteland into something green and growing. The colonists had built a home for her at the edge of the new forest, a vast structure of stone and wood where she could rest and heal and remember. Other survivors had begun to emerge. Valfrix was not the last of her kind, after all, across the galaxy. Dracorath, who had hidden for centuries, heard the broadcast from New Guangzhou and found the courage to reveal themselves. There were not many, perhaps a few dozen scattered across 1,000 worlds. But they were alive. The Galactic Council was in chaos. Some species were defending the Purge, insisting that it had been necessary, that the Dracorath had been a genuine threat. Others were demanding justice, calling for investigations, threatening to withdraw from the Council entirely. Humanity had become the center of a galactic debate. The young species that had dared to challenge centuries of accepted history and show mercy to an ancient enemy. Una visited Valthrix every day, just as she had when the dragon was still trapped in her cave. But now, instead of bringing water, she brought news and stories and questions about the universe. They sat together at the edge of the new forest, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that matched Valthrix's slowly healing scales. And they talked about everything and nothing. "Do you ever regret it?" Una asked one evening. "Do you ever wish you had just stayed hidden? That you had never trusted me?" Valthrix was quiet for a moment, her ancient eyes watching the last light fade from the horizon. "I spent 800 years in darkness," she said. "I spent 800 years believing that kindness had died with my people, that the galaxy had no room for creatures like me, that my only future was to waste away alone until my body finally gave up." She turned to look at Una with eyes that glowed like embers. "And then a human child crawled into my cave and gave me water," she said. "A child who had every reason to be afraid, every reason to run, every reason to hate me. And instead, she saw someone who was suffering and chose to help." The dragon's voice softened. "You asked me once why I begged a human child for help when I had given up on the galaxy." "I remember," Una said. "I think somehow I knew." Valfrix said, "I think somehow, in the depths of my despair, I sensed that your species was different, that you carried something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten, something precious and rare and desperately needed." "What's that?" Una asked. Valfrix smiled, a gentle curving of those massive jaws that somehow managed to look warm and kind. "You remember how to hope," she said. "You remember how to see the good in strangers. You remember how to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. And you remember that kindness, real kindness, given freely without expectation of reward, can change the universe." Una leaned against her friend's side, feeling the warmth of ancient scales through her jacket. "That seems like a lot to put on one species," she said. "Perhaps," Valfrix agreed. "But I have watched your people for a year now. I have seen how you treat each other, how you treat the galaxy, how you treat me, and I believe you are equal to the task." The last light faded from the sky, and the stars began to appear. Thousands of points of light scattered across the darkness. Somewhere out there, Una knew, other Dracorath were emerging from hiding somewhere out there. The galaxy was changing, learning new truths, questioning old lies, and it had all started with a canteen of water and a promise to come back tomorrow. "Valfrix," Una said quietly. "Yes." "Small one, I'm glad I found you." The ancient dragon wrapped one massive wing around her small human friend, sheltering her from the cooling night air. "And I am glad," Valfrix said, "that of all the beings in all the galaxy, it was a human who found me." They sat together beneath the stars. The last of an ancient species and the child who had saved her and they watched the universe turn above them. It was, Yuna thought, a very good universe to live in, and it was only getting better. The council ship arrived 3 days later. It descended from orbit like a blade cutting through the sky, sleek and silver and utterly without warmth. A machine built for one purpose, and one purpose only, Overseer. Krelvax stood at the observation window as his vessel entered the atmosphere, watching the brown and gray landscape of Varath 7 grow larger beneath him. He was Vorthani, a species known throughout the galaxy for their devotion to order and their absolute intolerance for anything that threatened it. His body was tall and thin, covered in smooth gray skin that reflected light like polished metal, and his eyes were cold black spheres that showed nothing of what he might be thinking. For 400 years, Krelvax had served the Galactic Council's Security Division. He had hunted criminals and terrorists and rebels across 1,000 worlds, but in all that time, he had never received an assignment like this one, a Dracorath biosignature on Varath 7. It should have been impossible. The purge had been thorough, meticulous, complete. Every Dracorath in the galaxy had been accounted for and eliminated, their worlds sterilized, their history erased, and yet the sensors did not lie. Something was alive down there, something that matched the genetic profile of a species that had been extinct for 8 centuries. Krelvax intended to correct that oversight in New Guangzhou. The colonists watched the council ship descend with fear in their hearts. Word had spread quickly through the small community. Whispered conversations in hallways and worried glances across dinner tables. Everyone knew that a council vessel meant trouble, but no one knew exactly what kind. No one except the Park family. Yuna sat with her parents in their small home, watching the ship through the window, feeling like the world was closing in around her. "We have to do something," she said. "We have to warn Velthrix. She already knows," her mother said quietly. "She can sense the ship. She told me yesterday that she could feel council technology approaching. She knows what's coming." "Then we have to stop them," Yuna insisted. "We have to protect her." Her father put his hand on her shoulder. "We're trying," he said. "But this isn't something we can do alone." Over the past 3 days, the Park family had been very busy. Dr. Mira had contacted every colonist she trusted, sharing the truth about Velthrix and the purge, asking for help. Some had refused, too frightened of the council to risk their lives for a stranger. But others had listened. Commander Thesa Yoon was one of them. She was the head of colony defense, a former military officer who had left Earth service to build a new life on the frontier. When Dr. Myra told her about Velthrix, Commander Yoon had been skeptical, even hostile, but she had agreed to visit the cave, to see the truth for herself. What she found there changed everything. "I spent 20 years in uniform," Commander Yoon had said, standing before the ancient dragon with tears in her eyes. "I followed orders. I did what I was told. I believed that the people in charge knew what they were doing. But this is wrong. This has always been wrong." She had turned to face the Park family. "I won't let them finish this genocide," she said. "Not while I'm still breathing, now." As Krelvax's shuttle touched down at the colony landing pad, Commander Yoon stood waiting with a dozen armed colonists at her back. They were not soldiers, not really. Just farmers and scientists and engineers who had picked up weapons because someone had to. But they stood with their backs straight and their eyes forward, ready to face whatever came next. Krelvax descended from his shuttle with a squad of council security officers behind him. He looked at the humans blocking his path with something like amusement in those cold black eyes. "Commander Yoon," he said, his voice smooth and utterly without warmth. "I am Overseer Krelvax of the Galactic Council Security Division. I am here to investigate reports of anomalous biosignatures in the restricted zone you call the Ashlands." "You will stand aside." Commander Yoon did not move. "I'm afraid I can't do that." "Overseer," she said, "the Ashlands are under colonial jurisdiction. And we haven't authorized any council operations in that area. Krelvax tilted his head slightly. Studying her. You misunderstand, he said. I am not requesting permission. I am informing you of my intentions. Council authority supersedes colonial jurisdiction in matters of galactic security. And this is very much a matter of galactic security. What kind of security threat are we talking about? Commander Yoon asked, keeping her voice steady. That information is classified, Krelvax replied. Now stand aside, or I will have you removed. For a long moment. No one moved. Then a new voice cut through the tension. Maybe you should tell everyone what you're really looking for. Yuna stepped out from behind the colonists, her small form somehow commanding the attention of everyone present. Krelvax looked down at her with those expressionless black eyes. A child, he said. How charming. And what exactly do you think you know? Little human. I know you're hunting the last Dracorath, Yuna said, her voice clear and strong despite the fear pounding in her chest. I know you want to kill her. Just like the council killed all the others 800 years ago. The silence that followed was absolute. Krelvax's officers exchanged glances. And even the overseer himself seemed momentarily taken aback. So the rumors are true, he said finally. The Dracorath has survived, and you humans have been harboring it. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have any idea what the penalty is for this crime? We know, Commander Yoon said. And we don't care? She stepped forward until she was face to face with the overseer, 800 years ago. The Galactic Council committed genocide, she said. They murdered an entire species because they were afraid. And they lied about it. They told everyone that the Dracorath were monsters. But they weren't. They were scholars and healers and peacekeepers. And you killed them anyway. Krelvax's expression did not change. The Dracorath were a threat to galactic stability, he said. Their elimination was necessary for the safety of all civilized species. No, Yuna said, stepping up beside Commander Yoon. They were killed because powerful people were scared of them. And being scared doesn't make it okay to murder someone. The overseer looked at this small human child. This girl who dared to challenge the authority of the Galactic Council. And something flickered in those cold black eyes. You are very brave, he said. Or very foolish, either way. It does not matter. The Council's laws are clear, and they will be enforced. He raised his hand. And his security officers began to advance. We can do this peacefully. Or we can do this violently, Krelvax said. The choice is yours, but either way, the Dracorath will be eliminated. And anyone who stands in my way will face the consequences. Commander Yoon did not back down. Then you'll have to go through us, she said. The colonists behind her raised their weapons, not pointing them at the council officers, but making it clear that they were prepared to fight for a moment. It seemed like violence was inevitable. Then Dr. Mira Park pushed through the crowd, holding a tablet in her hands. Before anyone does anything they might regret, she said. I think you should see this. She tapped the tablet, and a holographic display sprang to life above it. It showed Valfrix, the ancient dragon, speaking directly into a camera. My name is Valfrix, the recording said. I am the last of the Dracorath, and I have a story to tell. Dr. Myra looked at Krelvax with steady eyes. This message is being broadcast to every colony, every station, every ship in the sector, she said. In about 5 minutes, the entire galaxy is going to learn the truth about the Purge. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. Krelvax stared at her for the first time. Something like emotion crossed his face. It looked like fear. 3 weeks passed, and Yuna kept her promise. Every day she made the long journey to the cave, carrying as much water as she could fit in her backpack, spending hours talking with Valthrix before making the journey home again. The lies she told her parents grew heavier with each passing day. She told them she was exploring the canyons near the colony perimeter, that she was collecting samples for a school project, that she had found a quiet place to read and think. Her mother looked at her with worried eyes. Her father asked gentle questions that Yuna struggled to answer. They knew something was different about their daughter, but they trusted her enough not to push too hard. Yuna hated lying to them more than anything, but she could not betray Velfrix. The dragon was growing stronger. It was slow progress. Painfully slow, but Yuna could see the difference. Velfrix's scales had begun to regain some of their lost luster, shifting from dull gray to hints of deep purple and shimmering gold. Her voice was steadier, her breathing easier. And sometimes she could lift her head high enough to look Yuna in the eyes without trembling from the effort. They had become friends, the human girl and the ancient dragon. And their friendship was unlike anything Yuna had ever experienced. Velfrix knew things that no one else in the galaxy remembered. She told Yuna about the true history of the Galactic Council, about how it was founded not to preserve peace, but to protect the powerful species from those they feared. She told Yuna about the other species that had been wiped out before the Dracarys. Civilizations erased from history because they threatened the established order. She told Yuna about the lies woven into every history file, every school lesson, every official record. Lies so old and so complete that even the council members themselves had forgotten they were lies. The galaxy is built on graves, Velfrix said one afternoon, her voice heavy with ancient sorrow. And the living walk upon them without ever knowing whose bones lie beneath their feet. Yuna did not know what to do with this knowledge. She was 12 years old, a colonist's daughter on a frontier world, and she had stumbled into secrets that could shake the foundations of galactic civilization. All she could do was keep bringing water and keep listening, but the universe had other plans. It started with the sensors. New Guangzhou's perimeter defense system detected unusual thermal signatures in the ashlands, heat sources that should not exist in a dead wasteland. The Colony Council dismissed the first few readings as sensor malfunctions, but when the signatures persisted, they sent investigation teams to find the source. Yuna heard about it at dinner one evening and felt her blood turn to ice. They found something strange in one of the deep canyons, her father said, chewing his food thoughtfully. Crystalline fragments that don't match any known mineral on this planet. The xenogeology team is very excited. They're going to expand the search tomorrow, her mother added. Commander Yoon wants to make sure there's nothing dangerous out there before the next supply convoy arrives. Yuna could barely eat. They were going to find the cave. They were going to find Velfrix. She excused herself from dinner early, claiming she felt sick, and spent the night lying awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do. She could warn Velfrix, but what good would that do when the dragon could barely move? She could try to mislead the investigation teams, but she was just a child, and they were adults with sensors and equipment she did not understand. She could keep her secret and hope. They did not find the cave, but hope seemed like a fragile thing to bet a life on by morning. Yuna had made her decision. She found her parents in the kitchen, eating breakfast before their shifts began, and she stood in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. "I have to tell you something," she said, "and you're going to be angry with me and scared and probably disappointed. But I can't keep lying to you anymore." Her parents exchanged worried glances. Her father stood up from the table. "Yuna, what's wrong?" he asked. "Whatever it is, you can tell us." And so Yuna told them everything. She told them about sneaking into the ashlands, about finding the cave, about meeting Velfrix. She told them about the water and the conversations and the friendship that had grown between a human child and the last surviving Dracarys. She told them about the true history of the Purge, about the lies the Council had told, about the civilization that had been murdered for the crime of being powerful. When she finished, Her parents were pale and silent. Her mother sat down heavily in her chair, her hands trembling. Her father ran his fingers through his hair. His expression caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. "Yuna," her mother said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you understand what you're telling us? Do you understand how dangerous this is?" "I know," Yuna said, "but she's not dangerous, Mom. She's kind and gentle, and she's been alone for so long. She just wants to live." "Is that really so wrong?" Her father knelt down in front of her, taking her hands in his. "The council has laws about this," he said. "Harboring a Dracorath is a capital offense. They could execute us, Yuna. They could destroy the entire colony." "Then let them try," Yuna said. And she was surprised by the steel in her own voice. "Because I'm not going to let my friend die just because some aliens 800 years ago decided she didn't deserve to live." Her parents looked at each other for a long moment. Something passed between them. Some silent conversation that Yuna could not follow. And then her mother stood up and took a deep breath. "Show us," she said. The walk to the cave was the longest of Yuna's life. Her parents followed her in silence, carrying water containers much larger than anything Yuna could have managed on her own. When they reached the cave entrance and squeezed through the gap in the rocks, Yuna heard her mother gasp. Velthrix lay in the center of the cavern, her massive form illuminated by the flashlights they carried. She looked at the two adult humans with those ancient eyes, and Yuna saw fear flicker across her face. "Yuna," the dragon said, "what have you done?" "I told them the truth," Yuna said, "because they deserve to know. And because I couldn't keep lying to them." She walked forward and placed her hand on Velthrix's snout, just as she had done so many times before. "Mom, Dad, this is Velthrix. She's my friend, and she needs our help." Dr. Mira Park stepped forward slowly, her xenobiologist's mind clearly struggling to process what she was seeing. "You're real," she said. "You're actually real. I thought the Dracorath were extinct. I thought the Purge. The Purge killed my people," Velthrix said, "but it did not kill me. I have survived alone in this cave for 8 centuries, waiting to die, until your daughter found me and showed me that kindness still exists in this galaxy." Dr. Seojun Park stood beside his wife, his expression unreadable. "The investigation teams will find this cave," he said. "They have sensors that can detect heat signatures, life forms, anything out of the ordinary. We can't hide her forever." "Then we don't hide her," Yuna said. "We protect her." Her parents looked at her. "We protect her," Yuna repeated. "Because it's the right thing to do, because she didn't do anything wrong. Because the Purge was murder, and we're not murderers." Velthrix watched this small human family with something like wonder in her ancient eyes. "You would risk everything for me," she said. "Your home, your lives, your future. All for a stranger from a species you were taught to fear." Yuna's mother stepped forward and placed her hand beside her daughter's on the dragon's snout. "We're human," she said simply. "This is what we do." Outside the cave, the sun was setting over the ashlands and somewhere in orbit, a Galactic Council patrol vessel was receiving a very interesting sensor report. Yuna returned the next day. Just as she promised, she brought 3 canteens this time, filled to the brim with water from the colony's purification tanks. Hidden in a backpack that she told her parents was for collecting rock samples. The lie burned in her stomach, but she pushed it aside. Velthrix needed her. The journey to the cave took almost 2 hours, and Yuna spent every minute of it thinking about what she had seen, a real Dracorath, alive after all these centuries. Hidden in a cave beneath the ashlands, everything she had learned in school said this creature was a monster, a killer, a threat to all civilized life in the galaxy. But the creature she had met was none of those things. Velthrix had been gentle, desperate, grateful for a simple drink of water. Monsters did not cry when someone showed them kindness. When Yuna, crawled through the gap in the rocks, and entered the cave. She found Veilthrix in the same position as before. Her massive body stretched across the cavern floor, her head resting on the stone. But something was different. The Dracoth's eyes were brighter today. That faint orange glow a little stronger than it had been yesterday. "You came back," Veilthrix said, and there was wonder in her voice. "I thought perhaps I had dreamed you, small one. I have had many dreams in these long centuries, and few of them were kind." Yuna set down her backpack and pulled out the canteens. "I told you I would come back," she said, "and I always keep my promises." She helped Veilthrix drink, holding each canteen up to the dragon's massive jaws, watching as the water disappeared into that ancient throat. When all 3 canteens were empty, Veilthrix let out a long sigh that stirred the dust on the cavern floor. "Thank you," the Dracoth whispered. "You cannot know what this means to me, small Yuna. You cannot know how long I have been alone." Yuna sat down on a flat rock near Veilthrix's head, close enough to touch those cracked scales if she reached out. "How did you end up here?" she asked. "How did you survive when all the others died?" Veilthrix was quiet for a long moment, and Yuna worried that she had asked something wrong. Then the dragon began to speak, and her voice carried the weight of 800 years of sorrow. "I was a scholar guardian of the Dracoth," Veilthrix said. "My duty was to preserve knowledge, to teach the young ones, to remember the history of our people so that it would never be lost." She paused, gathering strength for words that clearly caused her pain. "We were not what they say we were, small one. We were not monsters or predators or threats to the galaxy. We were builders and healers and peacekeepers. We lived for thousands of years, and we used those years to study, to learn, to help other species grow and thrive." Yuna listened with wide eyes. This was nothing like what the history files said, but the Galactic Council feared us. Veilthrix continued. "They feared our size, our strength, our long lives. They feared that we might one day decide to rule instead of serve. And so they chose to destroy us before that day could ever come." The dragon's voice cracked with grief. "They called it the Purge, and they made it sound like self-defense. Like they had no choice, but it was murder. Small one, it was genocide. They killed my mate, my children, my students, everyone I had ever loved, and they did it because they were afraid of what we might become, not what we were." Tears welled in Yuna's eyes. She reached out and placed her small hand on Veilthrix's snout, feeling the rough texture of ancient scales beneath her palm. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." Veilthrix closed her eyes at the touch, and more tears slid down her face. "I survived because I hid," she said. "This cave was connected to underground rivers back then. There was water. There was food. There was enough to keep me alive while I waited for the soldiers to leave. But the orbital bombardments collapsed the tunnels and cut off the water. I have been trapped here ever since, too weak to dig my way out, too stubborn to simply die." She opened her eyes and looked at Yuna with something like amazement. "In all these centuries, no one has ever come. I heard the human colony being built above me. I heard your people walking on the surface, but I never called out for help. I knew what the galaxy believed about my kind. I knew that anyone who found me would either run in terror or call soldiers to finish what the Purge started." Veilthrix's gaze softened. "But you didn't either. Small one, you heard a monster begging for water, and you gave it to her without hesitation. Why? Why would a human child show mercy to a creature the entire galaxy was taught to hate?" Yuna thought about the question. She thought about her parents, about the stories her mother told her about Earth's history, about all the terrible things humans had done to each other before they learned better. "My mom says that humans used to be really bad at getting along," Yuna said slowly. "We hurt each other a lot. We did terrible things because we were scared or angry, or just because someone told us to, but we learned. We're still learning. She squeezed Valfrix's snout gently. Maybe the reason I helped you is because humans know what it feels like to be hated for no good reason. We know what it feels like to be scared of someone just because they're different. And we know that fear makes people do awful things. Valfrix stared at her for a long moment. Your species is young, the dragon said finally. You were not part of the galaxy when the purge happened. You were not taught to hate us from birth like the others were. Perhaps that is why you can see me clearly. Perhaps your youth is a gift that the older species have lost. Yuna smiled. Maybe, she said. Or maybe I'm just a kid who thinks it's wrong to let someone die of thirst when I have water to share. Valfrix made that sound again. The one that was almost a laugh. You are remarkable. Small Yuna, she said. Your people must be remarkable as well. To have raised a child with such a brave and gentle heart. Yuna felt her cheeks grow warm. I'm not brave, she said. I was scared when I first saw you. I'm still a little scared. Bravery is not the absence of fear, Valfrix said gently. Bravery is doing what is right, even when you are afraid, and you, small one, are one of the bravest souls I have ever met. They talked for hours after that. Valfrix told Yuna about the Dracarith civilization, about the cities they built that touched the clouds, about the music they created that could make stars sing, about the healing arts they developed that could cure diseases that other species thought were impossible to treat. She told Yuna about the great libraries that held the knowledge of 1,000 worlds. All of it destroyed in the purge, all of it lost forever, and Yuna told Valfrix about humanity, about Earth and its blue oceans and green forests, about the wars they had fought and the peace they had finally found, about the stars they had reached and the new home they were building on this distant world. When the sun began to set and Yuna knew she had to leave, she made another promise. I'll come back tomorrow, she said, and the day after that, and every day until you're strong enough to leave this cave. Valfrix looked at her with eyes that held 800 years of loneliness and pain. You cannot tell anyone about me. Small one, she said. If the council learns that a Dracarith still lives, they will send soldiers, they will finish what they started, and they will punish anyone who helped me. Yuna nodded. I know, she said. I'll keep your secret. I promise. She meant it with all her heart. But secrets have a way of finding the light, and some promises are harder to keep than others. Yuna Park was 12 years old when she discovered that everything the galaxy believed was a lie. She lived in New Guangzhou, a farming colony on a planet called Varath 7, which sat at the very edge of what the star maps called contested space. Her father, Dr. Seojun Park, spent his days in the greenhouses, growing crops that could survive the harsh soil and the long droughts that plagued this world. Her mother, Dr. Mira Park, studied the bones of creatures that had died long before humans ever set foot on this planet. Yuna loved her parents, but she found their work boring. She wanted adventure. And adventure did not grow in greenhouses or hide in old bones. What Yuna wanted was to explore the Ashlands. The Ashlands stretched for hundreds of kilometers beyond the colony fence, a vast wasteland of scorched rock and dead earth where nothing grew and nothing lived. The colonists were forbidden to enter the Ashlands under any circumstances. The official reason was safety. But Yuna had heard the older colonists whisper about what really happened there 800 years ago. The Galactic Council had ordered something called the Dracarith Purge. The Dracarith were a species of massive dragon-like creatures who had lived on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. According to every history file Yuna had ever read, the Dracarith were monsters. Predators who hunted other species for sport and threatened the peace of the entire galaxy. The Council had voted to exterminate them. And so they did. Orbital bombardments had turned Dracarith worlds into wastelands. and soldiers had hunted down every survivor until none remained. Vera 7 had been one of those worlds. And the Ashlands were all that remained of the Drakkar civilization that once thrived here. Yuna knew she was not supposed to go there. She went anyway. It started as small trips, sneaking past the perimeter sensors while her parents worked, walking just a few hundred meters into the dead zone before turning back. But each time, she went a little farther than the Andes. Ashlands were not as empty as everyone believed. Yuna found strange things in the rocky canyons and dried riverbeds. She found crystalline fragments that sparkled with colors she had never seen before, like frozen pieces of a rainbow that had shattered against the ground. She found marks on the canyon walls that might have been writing. Though she could not read them, she found massive grooves in the stone, as if something enormous had dragged itself through these passages long ago. On the day everything changed, Yuna followed a trail of those crystalline fragments deeper into the Ashlands than she had ever gone before. The fragments were scales. She realized, shed scales from something impossibly large. They led her to a canyon so deep that sunlight barely reached the bottom. And at the end of that canyon, she found a cave. The entrance was half buried under collapsed rock, but there was a gap just wide enough for a small girl to squeeze through. Yuna knew she should turn back. She knew her parents would be worried. She knew that nothing good could be waiting in a dark cave in the middle of a forbidden wasteland. But something pulled her forward, a feeling she could not explain, like the cave was calling to her. She crawled through the gap and found herself in a passage so tall that her flashlight could not reach the ceiling. The walls were covered in those same strange marks she had seen in the canyon, and the floor was worn smooth by the passage of something heavy. Yuna walked deeper into the darkness. The air grew warmer as she went, and she began to smell something strange, like old dust and dried flowers and something else, something alive. Then she heard it breathing slow and labored, like each breath was a struggle, like whatever was making that sound was using all of its remaining strength just to stay alive. Yuna's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She raised her flashlight with trembling hands and pointed it into the darkness ahead. What she saw made her forget how to breathe. It was a dragon, not a dragon from Earth Stories. Not quite, but close enough that the word fit. It was enormous, larger than any creature Yuna had ever seen, larger than the cargo shuttles that brought supplies to the colony. Its body stretched the entire length of the cavern, covered in scales that might once have been beautiful, but were now dull and cracked like old pottery. Its wings were folded against its sides, withered and torn, and its long neck lay flat against the ground, as if it lacked the strength to lift its own head. But its eyes were open. They were the color of dying stars, faint orange light flickering behind clouds of white. And they were looking directly at Yuna. The creature's mouth opened, and Yuna braced herself for fire, for teeth, for the death that all the stories promised. Instead, she heard a voice. It was barely a whisper, cracked and dry like paper left too long in the sun, speaking words in Galactic Common that Yuna had learned in school. Water, the voice said. Please, small one. Water. Yuna stared at the creature. This was a Drakkarath. This was one of the monsters from the history files, the predators who had threatened the entire galaxy, the beasts so dangerous that the Council had ordered their complete destruction and was begging her for water. Yuna's hands moved before her mind could catch up. She reached for the canteen on her belt, the one her mother made her carry whenever she went outside, and she unscrewed the cap with fingers that would not stop shaking. The Drakkarath watched her with those fading eyes, and Yuna saw something in them that she recognized: fear. Not the fear of a predator worried about its prey escaping, but the fear of someone who had been alone for so long that they had forgotten what kindness looked like. Una walked forward on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. She stopped in front of the creature's massive head, so close that she could see every crack in its ancient scales, so close that one snap of those jaws could end her life in an instant. She held out the canteen. "Here," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she expected. "You can have it all." The Dracoth's eyes widened for a long moment. Nothing happened. Then, slowly, painfully, the creature lifted its head just enough to drink. The canteen held 1.5 liters of water for a creature this size. It was nothing, a single drop in an ocean of thirst, but the Dracoth drank it like it was the most precious thing in the universe. And when the canteen was empty, Una saw something impossible. The creature was crying. Tears rolled down those ancient scales, cutting trails through centuries of dust. And the Dracoth looked at Una with an expression that broke her heart. "Why?" it whispered. "Why would you help me, small one? Do you not know what I am?" Una looked at this creature, this monster from the history files, this beast that the entire galaxy had agreed deserved to die. And she saw only someone who was suffering. "You were thirsty," she said simply. "And I had water." The Dracoth stared at her for a long moment. Then it made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been so full of pain. "I am Velthrix," the creature said, "and I have been waiting to die in this cave for 847 years. I had given up hope that anyone would ever show me kindness again." Una put the empty canteen back on her belt. "I'm Una," she said, "and I'll come back tomorrow with more water, I promise." She meant every word.